Gangaklegilwapsundal na Bamuk, Lida has it busy, the Gakim Seak to Flood we walking. Gen the measurement and leader has Kashvik Chitunia, Gagmasic Scott the Wecklad we walking, will Maxi Wijo Camco which is Gakim Sin, a blossom was Lewis. I want to welcome you to our session today, and our session is going to talk about what do we lose when we lose a language. I feel it's really important for you to carry that with you in your journey so that you'll have an understanding of what happened to the language and why is it that we're revitalizing and maintaining and stabilizing today. But this will be what you'll be doing once you understand what happens and what do we lose when we lose the language.
Lee was Ramona Wick Village.
Lee and Ramona, and Ramona is from our Kings Clear First Nation. The first thing that I wanted to share with you is when I was growing up in my home community of Negutukuk, Tobik, it was 100% language in the home. Even though we started going to school at that time it was the age of 7, and that was our first introduction to English. And so we would always have language at home. Which means you think in your language, you have ideas in your language, you dream in your language, you look to the future, in your language, and all of a sudden that's disrupted, and I think that's our struggle today. So I have a diagram here of the medicine wheel, and where language was where language was. Culturally, we did all our ceremonies, all our prayers in language. Even when the priests, first came with the Latin and brought prayers, I remember my grandmother still praying in our language. Today, we still do the rosary in our language, and I know it's at wakes today. Culturally, people still have rosaries, when we have our wakes. But I have to admit that's probably the biggest place you're going, or the most you're going to hear a language is at wakes, because that's when the remaining speakers know that our cultural responsibility is go to the wake. And the wake is an understanding of why we have it in the home. Most non-natives who don't understand how we do our wakes will say, well, how come they don't use a funeral home? And for us, using a funeral home is so out of our culture. It's so disrespectful to the body that's left behind, because it's that body's responsibility to bring the community back together again. It's like my last gift before I leave the physical world is to bring my community back together again. So when people say, I don't feel like going to a wake, they're not culturally sound, because we have to support that family. It's our responsibility. That's a community member. So culturally, you're going to hear the language mostly there. Matter of fact, not that long ago, I'd say about 5 or 6 years ago, there was one elder who requested of me, she didn't want any English in the room where she was going to be laid out. And I remember going to her family and saying, she doesn't want English in here. This was her last wish. Look, she even signed the paper. And we arranged it, and I have to admit it was the most beautiful thing that happened, because those who wanted to speak English would then go to the kitchen and speak English, and then they'd come back over to listen to all the malice that was happening. And the family actually gifted me with eagle feathers, because I was able to fulfill their mother's wish, by being able to just speak in the language and stuff. So culturally, language was very much present. Today we're reviving that. We do smudging ceremonies in the language. We do pipe ceremonies in the language again. You'll hear songs of our culture that are in the language again. Some new ones are coming out. Some old ones are being revived, where we found a beautiful quantity of old songs that were recorded back in the 30s and that are being revived today. So, and new songs are coming, because when people go on their vision quest, and sometimes they'll say, I come up with a new song, etc. So culturally, language was very much intact. Today, there's evidence of it, but not as much as it was when we were using our own language as language one. Now it's language two. Socially, it's very important. What we're reviving today, as far as social aspects of language, is where a child is born, for example. That child has the right to be born into their language. When they're removed from the community and they're being born in the hospital, we're trying so hard to make sure that there's a speaker there that will actually welcome the child in. So lucky for me, there's an initiative called From the Womb to Beyond in English. In Malice, it is called Oloiganeag Wechkuabazitid, which means for the seventh generation. And we have a program where we actually have Aboriginal women trained as doulas, labor coaches, so that as we're coaching the moms and the babies to come into the world, we welcome that baby right off the bat with a song in the language or something in their language. So that's happening now, and I'm very proud of that aspect of it. The other aspect of socially is at birthday parties. Today you hear happy birthday being sung in Maliseet, and you're hearing it more and more. So that's another way where language is still, but not very often, because you'll break out with the English first before you break out with the Maliseet. And the other one is gatherings. We still have seasonal gatherings. We have our Fiddlehead festivals, and it's still called Fiddlehead Festival, but we're trying hard to bring it back the traditional way we called it was Masozil. Maguiatinachi Masozil. And more you'll see invitations being sent out by federal and provincial organizations that will actually ask me for translations of an event that's coming up. So there's a lot of translations that are happening. So social invitations now are actually being done. Traditional weddings are coming back as well, which was a social event. And it's very important. Matter of fact, one of the roles that I play, that I help with, is within the church. When a couple wants to get married in the church, they're always asked, there has to be a marriage preparation course. Well, I teach part of that course. The priest will teach the aspect of how to get them ready and what kind of a ceremony they want. My role is I bring the language in, and whether they're native or non-native, because I say a marriage in my language means nizwitijik, nibwiwuk, meaning two people promising to walk the same path. That means there's a commitment that they both decided, and they both are willing to walk the same path, as to one going this way and one going that way, and occasionally crossing over. They earn what we call chinibwitit. They earn wasagnazitik, a shawl. And meskmilot wasakagnigan tachui pugwatwawal wibhun. They have to earn their eagle feathers. And so the shawl is quite long, and at the end of it, it has these little strings attached. And the shawl is only about this wide, but it has the 4 sacred colors on the shawl. And at the end of it are little strings, just like the wampum belt. And like you'll see on the wampum belt here, our wapa, it has open strings. And it's to make room for each generation to add their histories to the belt. So a married couple has something like that, but they have eagle feathers at the end of it. In order for them to earn their eagle feathers, what they have to do is they come into a sweat lodge. They have to listen to other couples that they admire or respect, and those couples will then talk about their trials and tribulations of what it takes to travel, to be two as one. And then at the end of that, I gift them with the eagle feather, and then the eagle feathers will be at their wedding ceremony. then when they have an argument, the eagle feathers are supposed to teach them how to not carry anger overnight. So they have to wrap the feathers, say we were a couple and we had an argument, then rather than go to bed angry, what we would have to do is put the shawl around us holding each other's eagle feathers and be honest with each other. So it's truth and honesty. And when you bring that to a relationship, then trust is automatically building, and out of that trust is love and all the sacred gifts. And so socially, that's coming back, and we're starting to combine the two. It wasn't that long ago, just this year, I was involved in 3 of those, and I have a few more that are planned for next year. So socially, that part of the language is coming back, but it was always there before. The same thing with the seasonal activities, as I mentioned, is when we hunt, we have to we do a ceremony and give gratitude to the moose, the deer, and we're starting to make things from those again. You know, where our drums are made from moose hide or deer hide or elk, depending on what it is. But there's always a ceremony. So now there's language being brought back in those ceremonies when we do something for the hunter. Christmas, of course, we did an entire session. We've translated "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," Huron Christmas Carol, and some that were already written, some old stories about the winter moon. As I had mentioned before in one of our other sessions, the 4 seasons are women, and therefore there are stories about each of the women and their responsibilities. And so we have those stories as well. And so that's the social aspect. Wintertime is a time where we would make things from our hunt. Say somebody in our family was lucky enough to get porcupine quills. That would be the time in the winter when we would learn what to do with the porcupine quills, or to weave with them, or moose hair, how to learn how to do weavings of moose hair. So that would be the time to do that. And actually we're lucky enough at St. Mary's, we have a wonderful artist who teaches how to do moose hair embroidery, which is a very unique thing. And of course, each season has something to offer. So these are the things that we're fortunate enough to continue to have. So socially, I see more and more language coming. But you still want to hear it when children are celebrating their birthdays. You want to hear those children, I know how to sing it in Maliseet, or Gas Cassigan, how old are you? You want them to say it. So I'm trying to encourage parents to at least put the number of how old that child is and change it every year. So that child will say, instead of saying, I'm 9 years old, they'll say, Esplanade and Gassigan. You know, and of course, using the language, socially. So, for example, at my house in Fredericton, I used to have Olawiganuk, which is number 7, because my address is 7 Paul Street. And I remember the postman coming up to me and saying, who are the Olawiganuk family? I thought the Pearlies lived here. And I said, the Pearlies do live here, but Olawiganuk is the number 7. And so, I get it, and so that's the kind of thing that needs to come more often, is to start seeing the language as well, because we do come from an oral tradition, but the power of seeing your language is awesome. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to see your language. So socially, we need to do some more work in our where language needs to be. We have sessions where we did before, where we go bowling in Maliseet. We go shoot pool in Maliseet, we can golf in Maliseet, we can play darts in Maliseet, we can play bingo in Maliseet, shop in Maliseet. So we're building. It just has to be used. Tachwek on it means we have to use it. Miskiskatawek before we lose it. Now, economically, we need a lot of work. There's no workplaces that can say we use Maliseet only. We're trying to build on that. We're trying to promote every store owner or every business that wants to come into our community, we're trying to make sure that they encourage some kind of language promotion. For example, the grocery store one time, like yes, we have Kajiku's commercial center here at St. Mary's, and it symbolizes what the place was before it became a shopping mall. It was woods, little woods. But we need more signs in our language. We need Malsaniguam grocery store, Naji Dupet Dazik Bemiawik guest bar, Eat Lankwek Cot did with the Maganak, where they sell, tobacco. Chiwen Nutsi Pilwewi Guamak, the health center where they distribute medicine, and I think it would be beautiful to see. They can still have the English, but they would need to have the Maliseet prominent. So we need that because we don't shop. Not too many people have gas need laudu. How much is that? Oh, zamaudu, too much. Oh, the baudu, kesquide. I can afford that. So those things we have to work on. And I know businesses want to. Like I know we've been promoting. When the dictionaries came out, I expected a dictionary to be in every business, especially in the community, So I went to Peace Hills Trust and asked them, would you please buy a dictionary and display it for your customers so that they'll know you're one of the businesses that's going to contribute to saving the language. And all the new businesses, I was the one that would go and introduce myself and say, I'm the linguist in the community. Any way you want to promote language, just ask me, and stuff. So, but there has to be more of that, and I'm hoping, that will happen. It's one of my dreams. So economically, we need to bring language to the workplace, and I think with our project here, we'll be able to bring language to the workplace. Politically, there's only one community in the Atlantic provinces where language is spoken, but it's not Maliseet, it's Mi'kmaq. They actually hold their council meetings in the language. If the counselor is not fluent in the language, they're allowed to bring a speaker, and the speaker actually gets paid to be a translator for that meeting. Now, here at St. Mary's, we do have council meetings. We have speakers, elders that are also part of their elder council. But I'm not sure how often the language is used, but it needs to be used because decision making is different when decisions are made in the language and when they're in English. And I think you realize that now because treaties have become an issue. We're going to court. And what we're going to court for is the interpretations of the treaties. When it's designated in English, even though it says, Aboriginal people have the right to fish and hunt forever. To us, forever means for that 7th generation yet to be born. But English has changed it to mean hunting season, as long as there are stocks left, and that wasn't part of the original treaty. So that's why we're going to court, is because 7th generation to us means 7 generations from today, and not necessarily I'm the 4th generation of speakers or the 3rd generation. It doesn't mean chronological, so you can see the difference between English concept and Maliseet concept. And that's why we're probably continuing to go to the courts. And that's why we have to save our language, because you're going to have to defend that concept in your language. And that's why one of the things that's really important to hang on to it, because just by living in a community, a Maliseet community or a Mi'kmaq community, isn't enough to consider yourself a Maliseet or a Mi'kmaq. You need that language as well to be able to save it, because they'll say, if we're nation to nation, just like this wampum belt in front, it's a 2-row wampum belt, means our Aboriginal canoe and the non-Aboriginal canoe are supposed to be heading the same direction. It's never, you'll never see it hanging one above the other, which is the way it's kind of carried today, because we're being told how to, work through our politics, our culture, our economy, and our social life. It's supposed to be vertical so that we're side by side as nation to nation. So we have to bring that idea back, of doing that. So politically, we need more of our words. I recently did translate the Indigenous Rights of Peoples, Article 40 for the United Nations. And so just knowing that Maliseet is at the United Nations means a lot to me. So what I'm doing, hopefully, is to take it to each chief and teach them how to recite it, teach them how to say it, because it took me a month just to translate it, because it's not a direct translation. It has to be conceptual. And so that's why it's important that if we're going to make political decisions, we better have it stem from our own language first. So that's one of the things that was intact, before English became the dominant language. Now, that's community responsibility of where language should be. An individual has a responsibility to where language should be. Spiritually, being able to say your prayers, being able to talk to Creator in your language. I've been to conferences where elders will be asked to do an opening prayer, and an elder or a Cree elder would come up and recite a prayer in their language, and then he'd go and sit down, and everybody's going, I thought he was going to translate. Then the elder would come back up and says, I knew you wanted me to translate, but I wasn't talking to you guys. I was talking to Creator, so I don't need to translate. Just me and Creator's language. So that's why we need to teach. You need to be able to say a prayer in your own language. I work a lot with at the hospitals when people are crossing over, and they'll always ask me, could you pray for me in our language? And so it's very powerful when the last thing they hear is their language and stuff. So spiritually, we have a responsibility to learn, like just how to say Creator in our language, or Buliwan, as a prayer. Emotional, how to express your emotions in your language. I know you hear a lot like legal when somebody's crying, and you just go legal, and that's having pity for somebody else. That's a powerful word, because then you're showing compassion just with that one word, legal. So there's going to be a list of words that will tell you about your emotions, like being Lidahas, Naskadahas, Ginidahas, all of those hopes and dreams and discouragements. You have to have a balance of how to express your emotions. So you should at least be able to say, I'm happy I'm learning my language. Lidahas adligakimsi. Or Naskadahas danjigakimsi ladwewagan. Sometimes I get discouraged when I'm learning my language. You have to be able to express yourself. So emotions are very important. And we treat emotions differently than non-Aboriginal people, because for us, tears are powerful, but sometimes in English, tears are thought to be a weakness, but for us it's strength, and especially from a male. And imagine telling a teenager today, go ahead and cry, Gus. They go, no way, I'm not going to cry. I'm a man. And unfortunately, what that young man isn't allowed to show emotion, and that's damaging, because when they can't share emotion, they have to hide it and pretend to be stronger than they are. Then they carry it from the time they're a little boy to an adolescent, to a man, to an elder, and then all of a sudden it's as if there's, because what happens when we don't share our emotions is it's almost as if we lock one door from a pain, because we're not going to let no more pain in our heart. And so emotion is very important to be able to talk about in our language, and we have to honor emotion. So we have to teach our children that it's okay to be angry. Just don't go to bed angry. Let's talk it out. And that way that child will learn that the next day is going to be something to be grateful for, instead of carrying anger from one day to the next, to the next, to the next. And I see that now dealing with mental health. There's a lot of issues out there that have to be dealt with, and it's because no one's learned how to handle their emotions in their language. Physical, you should be able to talk about yourself physically. And it goes beyond body parts. For example, just yesterday, found out that somebody had cancer, and in our language, amos sabik wine, amos sabik titlipo, or is another way of saying it, meaning amos sabik is spider. And so how to describe cancer in our language is it's a spider built in a web, and the spider is built in a web, and so the cancer grows. And so just in our language we have those traditional terms of calling sickness. So it's important to know those terms, because sometimes when our elders will go and the doctor will give them an assessment of their health, they don't understand it. But when you tell them in their language, oh, okay, they have an understanding. So there's a lot of misdiagnosis because the elders are being told in English, who are speakers, how to take care of themselves, and they're not, there's a language difference there. So that matters on how you take care of your physical. Also on our food, there's a lot of food security issues today because we're not eating traditional food. And our children today think that we're brought up on hamburgers and hot dogs, and we weren't, except it was moose meat. And unfortunately, you have some young people today that will turn their nose at, ooh, moose meat, and we're going, we never had cholesterol problems before, we never had diabetes, we never had high blood pressure, we never had cholesterol issues, we never had early heart attacks, because we ate well, and now we're not eating well. So taking care of your physical, being able to do now, there is a Canada's food guide we translated, so we're trying to incorporate that. Canada Food Guides does it in our language as well. So, but it's important because language needs to be there as well. Mentally, your mind, how do we handle it, and it all has to do with attitude, how you think, because they always say you can think yourself well. You just have to know how to do it, instead of accepting all the negativity only. You have to turn that negativity around, and stuff. So it's so these are individual responsibilities. Is how we think about our language, what we think about our language, and how to be able to talk it in the different realms. And of course, community realm. We talked about the community realm. We talked about the individual realm, where language loss. And now we have to think about the difference between oracy and literacy. We come from an oral tradition, so our learning language was listening and speaking. Today, we have two more gifts. We have reading and writing, So some people will say, no, our language shouldn't be written. I'm saying, yes, please write it, because it's so awesome to be able to look at a book and it's in your language. Anytime I travel, I take something with me that's in my language, because I want to be able to see my language, and I can show people my language is going to survive. See, it's written. So it's very powerful to be able to have a literacy aspect. So we call it oracy and literacy. So now we have 4 ways of saving the language: listening, spistamen, klawestun, speaking it, wikigan, writing it, nagaktigising, reading it. So and so you want to see more language. You want to see more language in our communities. Some communities have taken a step forward by renaming their community in their traditional name. The Mi'kmaq have, for example, Zidansisk is in Nalasit, and that literally means Little St. Anne's Point. That's a strong statement to be able to say, I'm from Zidansisk, and they'll go, where's that? Then you have, then you can tell them. But there's pride knowing that you have a place named, in your language. Some of the things that I wanted to remind you is some terms. These are linguistic terms that are used, at the academic level. Linguicide, for example. People will say, well, what's linguicide? Well, linguicide is when people make the conscious decision to stop using their language. because it's not acceptable, or not to pass it on to their children. And this is kind of what happened when residential schools were in place. The parents didn't want their children to go through the same punishment as they went through, and so they says, you're going to have to learn English, never mind Maliseet, never mind Mi'kmaq. So, because there's no more law that says you can't speak your language. So we don't have to fall into that linguicidal feeling anymore. One of the characteristics of a gradual death is when the younger generation are more proficient in the dominant language. So you kind of see that now, because when you try to, like, I have a 2-year-old granddaughter who I haven't spoken English to yet. She hasn't started speaking to me in Maliseet, but I know she's getting there. And but I want her to speak in her language comfortably as well, and not just it be at school. I want her to use it at home. So when she comes visit me, that's what her and I, we communicate in our language, in my language, in her language. The degree of language loss can be affected by our response to the threat. We all know what language loss is like, and I just want you to know that it depends on you as an individual. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to commit to it? And this isn't just for people who are Maliseet descent or Mi'kmaq descent or any other descent. This is also for non-Aboriginal people who want to, pick up the language. We've done a really awesome job helping you save yours. Maybe we can put a request out there for you to pick up ours and help us save ours, and stuff. So that way we can be two-row wampum belt strength, where our languages are both valid and validated and celebrated. So when unlike the normal idea of an archive which continues to exist long after the archivist has died, the moment the last speaker dies, then that's it. And it's like a whole library. Every time we lose an elder, a whole library has been extinguished. A language is saved when recorded as it lives on, but needs fluent speakers to be a living language. So yes, we've done a lot of recordings, but if these recordings that we're making for you aren't used, then they're just going to be archival, and that's not what we want. We want you to become that speaker that's using this language that we're teaching you. So the preservation, this is a quote that I like from one of the elders, is, preservation is what we do to berries. And I think it goes, preservation is what we do to berries and jams. I'm sorry, I just lost my PowerPoint. Yeah. Okay, right here. Preservation is what we do to berries, salmon in cans. Books and recorders can save a language, but only people and communities can keep them alive. It's very important, that's what we need. So basically what I wanted to say is, what do we lose when we lose a language? We lose our culture. Look at us now struggling to revive it, where we actually have elders who, when they're asked to come into a sweat lodge, will say, well, but I'm a Catholic. And so that they think it's a religion, and our spirituality isn't a religion. It's a responsibility to be grateful for each day that's gifted us, for every breath we take, for every step we walk, for every emotion we feel, and we're going to lose that if we don't use our language. We lose our greetings. For example, Maliseet has such a beautiful greeting, and it's been chopped up and anglicized, and that's okay. I just don't want people to forget what our real greeting is, which is Dungakalo Gil, which means, how is your spirit today? And when we say Mejidebeskun, Mejidebeskun, it means I am one with creation. I have done ceremony. And the way we're doing it today, we're going to Lis Pazwil, good morning. You know, I never remember elders ever saying that, but we're saying it now. So what we're doing is we're taking that English model, bringing it into here, and we're greeting each other. Lis Pazwil, Uli Gizibasqueg, you know, nice in the afternoon. Uli Wulagwil, good evening, you know, and stuff. And even with the Dungok, people are saying Dungok, you know, and stuff. But so we sound like crows, you know. And no offense to the Crow clan, because I know you're out there. But at least I tell my students, I said, even the crows speak our language. Every morning you listen, they'll go Dungok, Dungok, Dungok. You answer them, okay? And I had students come, Mrs. Pearlie, you're right. They are speaking Maliseet. I said, see? But they used to say Dungok, you know, instead. So, because an elder, if you would go to an elder and you just say Dungok, they're going to say, how's my what? You know, so you have to be specific and say Dungok, So we're losing those greetings. We're anglicizing our greetings. We lose our praises, you know, our kuligizat. You know, and stuff. It's so important to tell somebody they're doing a good job, even when they're struggling. You know, because if you don't, then they're not going to want to learn it. So it's just a message to our speakers out there. When somebody is learning and they don't necessarily get the intonation right, don't say they're saying it wrong. Just say thank you, you know, for saying it, and just kind of repeat. You know, I still make mistakes as a fluent speaker, and my elder doesn't say, you didn't say that right. My elder will repeat it in the way it should have been said, you know, and that's the gentle way of making speakers. You don't want to shame them into, you know, like elders will say, I'm laughed at, I'm afraid to make mistakes. You don't want to do that, you know, there's enough humor in our language. And I tell students that there's humor in our language, because there's, for example, the word Bakwinakusin means long time no see, which means it's somebody that you're acquainted with and you hadn't seen them in a long time, so you would say Bakwinakusin.
Bakwinakusin.
But if I say Bakinakusin, which is just the difference between a Q and a K, then I'm saying Bakinakusin, it's about time you took a shower. So there's a difference between the two. So there's enough humor in our language, but when we laugh, it's not because you're saying it wrong. It's because you're bringing medicine, and medicine is, you know, humor is good medicine. And so our language is promoted that way. We lose our natural laws. Very important. We have a law of survival. We have a natural law on how we're supposed to respect. I remember my grandmother, when my brother was climbing on a tree and he broke off a branch. And my grandmother said, come here. Took him outside and said, how would you like it if I broke your arm? How do you think the tree likes it that you broke his arm? That's so, you know, those are the teachings that I grew up with. That's why I don't break branches. I don't, you know, do those things, you know. If I do and I need medicine, I ask permission. Cedar, when I pick cedar for making medicine, can I take some of your medicine, please? I'm using it for, you know, Chiuyuduin. And then I have purpose for the medicine. It's not just being disrespectful and thinking of a tree as an object. So those are our natural laws we're losing because there's a disconnection. And I know I mentioned this before, is when you're disconnected from your environment, then you stop caring about the environment, and the environment seems like it's something separate from you, whereas our language teaches us we're whole. I can't be whole without my environment. I need air. I need the water. I need the earth. You know, see, I said it again, the earth. And that's what English teaches me, is I objectify, and I don't want to objectify. She's Chikikwas and mother. But when I use English, I tend to disconnect myself. So I have to train myself as a speaker that even in my English exchange, I have to keep that same spirit of belonging and being holistic in that. So that's why those are the natural laws that we're losing. We lose our songs. You know, we're copying songs, but we're losing those traditional songs. I just found a song my grandmother sang that was sung at funerals, and so it's a song I have to learn. But I want to revive it because it must have been important enough, because there's still some people who remember my grandmother singing that song. So I don't want to lose that song, so I need that song. Cures. What medicines do we have? I've never had a medicine cabinet. I didn't grow up with a medicine chest. I didn't grow up with a pill box. I didn't grow up with those things that give you little compartments for pills. Never grew up with that. But now every home that I go to, nobody's using our traditional medicine. Your grandfather. I used to love going there because you could smell, you know, the gilchus was hanging in his room. He'd have the sweet ferns drying. He'd have all of the teas that he makes. All of those are there. And, you know, and that's what we need is we're losing our cures. You know, we're losing our cures, and we need those cures, both for mental illnesses, you know, and because there's ways of healing our people when their mind is in a dark place, you know, and we call it the, you know, the butterfly, and we're all butterflies, but sometimes that butterfly is back in the cocoon again, and so we have to help that person come out of that cocoon again, and there's a cure for that, but it's traditional, it's not in a pill box. So we're losing those, but we have to revive them. Our legends, when we talk about Gluskab, you know, and it's pronounced Gluskap, and I'd say, no, it's Gluskab. It was in our language first, Gluskab. Gluskab means Gelwazid Skadab, the good man, the good-hearted man, the good teacher, you know, and it doesn't mean liar, which it's come to learn now and stuff. But we're losing them because when we tell our children about Gluskab, they don't want to hear about Gluskab. They want to hear about the Hulk, Spider-Man, you know, those are their heroes. We have to bring back our heroes because our heroes, you know, were, you know, just as good as Spider-Man and the Hulk and everybody. But we have to bring those back. So that's why we need to, those of us who remember those stories, we have to record them and put them down and make sure that they're going to be there for our 7 generations. We lose our prayers. You know, every time an elder is asked, would you please say a prayer? And every elder will always go, they'll go to the Our Father, because in their mind they were strapped to have to say those prayers, you know, and then and so for them, automatically in public they'll say the rosary because they think those are the only prayers. But I tell them, no, a prayer is compliment, you know. You look so happy, you know. That's a prayer, you know. So we can say, you know, just giving gratitude is a prayer. So we're losing those. Everybody thinks the only prayers that can be said are from the Bible, and that's not true. And I have people that'll say, I don't know how to pray. And I say, of course you know how to pray. If you can say thank you, if your prayer has begun. So we're losing that idea of what prayers are. Okay, so we need to bring that back, and we can do that in our language. We lose our wisdom. Our elders are called elderly, and now we're starting to put them in homes as well. We never did that before, but they were our wisdom keepers. They were our scholars, you know. So any projects that we work on now, we call our elders scholars because that's who they are. They're very scholarly and stuff because of all the generations of wisdom that they've carried to date and still carry. And so we have to make sure that we tap into their knowledge, that they are the library. And I know I had an elder one time when I went to go interview him, and he said, what do you want from me? You're the college-educated one. I said, yeah, I learned from books, but you learn from the land. I want to be like you. I want to know how to live off the land like you did. You know, so He says, I never thought about it that way, but we're losing that wisdom if we don't tap into that language. We lose our way of life. You know, that's why we have, maybe that's why we have so much incarceration. Maybe that's why we have so much domestic violence issues. Maybe that's why we have so many mental health issues. We've lost our way of life because we've lost our language. And that's not to happen. So we need each other to be able to save our languages. Liwan, Nitapsil, I know this is deep, but I really want you to carry your language here. Then it'll come here. Then when it's repeated, that's when it's wisdom. It's never wisdom if it stays here and only here. So, Liwan, Apdach, Kazalnuba.
Liwan